Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think we are going to make a start, if that's okay, everyone. So just to let you know, I am Rachel Bevan, Director of Statistics Division at the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. And it's my pleasure to be the one welcoming you to today's Asia-Pacific Stats Café on governance statistics, new solutions and approaches. Can I just ask everyone who's not speaking, can you just can you put your mute on? Thank you very much. So today's Stats Cafe, we're going to be looking at governance statistics, new solutions and approaches to address the information gap. So in the region, we know that sadly we are very off track to meet the SDGs. And as a region in Asia Pacific, based on the current rate of progress, we won't actually meet the SDGs until I think it's 2062, which is 32 years behind the target of 2030. But sadly, not only are we behind, we actually don't really know where we actually are on some of the SDGs. We can't actually assess the progress because we know that for over half of the SDGs, we don't actually have sufficient data. So when we look across all of the SDGs, SDG 16 on peace, justice and strong institutions is one there where there's actually no data for nearly 60% of the indicators, and only 23% of the indicators have sufficient data. And just to be clear as well, when I say sufficient data, that means having at least 2 data points over the time period. And I think we'd all agree that 2 data points is nowhere near enough to really be able to assess progress at the country level. But actually, we need a lot more data than that as well to actually look at things like what's happening for different population groups. But that's why today's session is particularly important, because we really need to do so much more to address that. And I'm really pleased that we've got a great lineup of speakers. And I can see also we've got a great audience as well, and I can see from both the audience and also from our speakers we have people joining us from across the globe. So let me also say a huge thank you as well, particularly for those who are joining us when it might not be during their working hours. We really do appreciate you all taking that time to join the Stats Cafe today. It's always a bit lonely when you're speaking, so please, do make use of the chat function. It's there so that you can provide comments. Also, feel free to put in there which country you're joining us from. Put in there some questions as well for our speakers. And just use it as well to perhaps share your own experiences. These sessions are always much better when we have participation from all of you, because when we look across the board, there's so much more experience out there, and we will all gain if we can share more together. So as ever, our Stats Cafe is being recorded today. I think you will have already seen a little reminder about that. And we will make sure that the recording and all the presentations will also be made available to you and to everyone after the session. So feel free as well to have a look for that after the session. I'm keeping my remarks very short because it's a big topic with lots of speakers. So I'm going to now hand you over to our moderator, who is Alexandra Wild. And she is team leader for the Governance, Data and Analytics team in UNDP Global Policy Centre on Governance. And she's going to take us through the session today and introduce our great lineup of speakers. So over to you, Alexandra, and thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you as well to all the speakers. Over to you, thanks.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you also for the collaboration to you and your team to put together this session focused on governance statistics. We're really delighted to be engaged, and it's really great also to see the participation from a variety, a diversity of institutions, not just statistics offices, but also from government and from other multilateral civil society, and also well beyond ESCAP countries. So really looking forward to a good discussion, and for colleagues on the call to really also share their experiences and insights. So I'll be moderating this Stats Cafe session. And as Rachel said, I work at UNDP's Global Policy Centre for Governance here in Oslo. It's just after 9 in the morning here. A significant priority for us is to support countries and partners in their work on governance statistics and also in the measurement and monitoring of SDG 16. So today we're really talking about measuring the quality of governance in a country. And this is really crucial for several reasons, as it directly impacts the country's development, stability, and well-being of its citizens. We're going to be looking at the area of governance statistics and some of the advances in that, and how statistics officers in particular can contribute to this through a city group, the prior city group on governance. And as Rachel said, we're also talking about Sustainable Development Goal 16, with its peace, justice, and strong institutions targets and indicators. SDG 16 is absolutely central to creating a peaceful and stable environment, and we know very much that without that, other areas of development are not going to happen and can be undermined. We're also going to be looking at monitoring SDG 16 and how that helps track the effectiveness and accountability of institutions, ensuring that they serve the public interest. And we're going to be looking at also, I mean, there's a number of things you could highlight with SDG 16, but I think what's really salient and really important for this session, in terms of the things that we're going to do a deeper dive into, is how SDG 16 is really crucial for ensuring that vulnerable and marginalized groups, including women, children, persons with disabilities, other minorities, are protected from violence, discrimination, and injustice. So we're going to be looking at a couple of tools that are going to be presented by colleagues on discrimination and equality and participation that are really at the heart of this. So as Rachel said, the data gaps are significant in the region, and we're also going to be looking at solutions to fill those gaps. Mariana, who'll be speaking in a minute, who's also from UNDP's Global Policy Centre for Governance, will be sharing more on the status of SDG 16 in the region, the sort of progress status, but also looking at some of those data gaps and some of the tools to address those gaps and where to go for help. And then Liliana Montero, who is the coordinator in the prior secretariat, together with Vebjørn Aarlandslid from Statistics Norway, who's one of the co-chairs of the task teams, will share the work of the prior city group, and in particular, some of the instruments that are being developed there, and again, how statistics officers can engage. And I think there are other partners in the prior group that are online, and they will also kind of chip in. As Rachel said, put questions, comments in the chat. There'll be a little bit of time after we hear from colleagues for discussion and for you to share your experiences and insights. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Mariana to share more on the SDG 16 work and support. Over to you, Mariana.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening as well. I'm joining from UNDP, as my colleague Alex already said. We are a very small but very efficient office here in Oslo, Norway, and we've been working for a very long time on SDG 16, but also on governance broadly. So next slide. So what we heard from Rachel, the very worrying situation that we are in terms of data availability, but there are also some big advances that we have recently. And I'm going to ask you, as I speak, if you have any points, any question, anything, you can put it in chat. I'm looking at the chat. I'll be responding as we go. So we also have great developments. One of the greatest developments that we had recently, it's not on data availability, we know that, that's a longer process, but it's the fact of we recognized governance as a domain. So the Statistical Commission, which is a United Nations member state-led body that decides and talks and try to develop and endorse standards that are valuable and are useful for all member states. So they decided that governance statistics should be a domain. There's a part of governance statistics, and this is my colleague, the colleague that will follow me, maybe explain a little bit more in depth. So governance statistics is very broad. It includes access to justice. It includes the discrimination that we hear about. It includes participation. It includes corruption. It is a broader notion, a broader concept. So this part, the prior group is doing this amazing work in trying to develop these standards, but they will be presented by Vebjorn and Liliana. And in what we call governance, there is this smaller part, but a very crucial part, which is the SDG 16, where we already have the standards. It's still insufficient to measure the broad concept of governance, but it's already there. One example, we have corruption. We already know how to measure bribery, but there's a lot of parts of corruption that we still don't know how to measure for statistical purposes. So this a broader part has to be done by other mechanisms. So this is just the first where we are, more or less. Next, please. And the SDG 16, we had a major push since the beginning of Agenda 2030. We have, and when I say we, I'm saying all of us that work in statistics. So the international organizations, all of them, the civil society, the NSOs, the regional commissions, all of us contributed to several standards already that are supporting standardizing, harmonizing what we are calling the different parts of governance and what we are calling the different parts of SDG 16. We have the victimization surveys by UNODC on how do we measure victimization, including gender-based violence, including other parts that are super important. We have a human rights-based approach for data by OSHR that give us the standards, a little bit more ethical standards while we are going to the field. We have the prior group that my colleagues in the end, they have very crucial handbook that they published in 2020 that tells us, okay, this is what we define as governance. We have the SDG 16 survey that gives us most of the survey-based indicators under SDG 16 is the methodology. So we have this huge body that comes from several organizations, several types of structures. All of them have been worked on with the member states, so maybe even some of the colleagues that are today in this call. For the next, please. So we are at the point that we have the standards. We have some of the standards. We don't have all. We still don't have all, but we have some of the standards that are sound, that have been tested, and that we need urgently to know, as Rachel was saying, where are we in these SDGs? We made this commitment in 2015. All of us have invested time. The NSOs, even if not on SDG 16, but in the others, all NSOs are investing as well on SDGs. Our countries, our governments, our budgets. So we should be able to know where we are. And we also need urgently to know where is the vulnerable group that we need to address, that we need to work with. So we are at a point that we still need, we are at 2024. If we want to know where will we be in 2030, we need to measure today, now. Next. So this is the statistics from yesterday, from the global database. We improved a little bit. So at this point, we have 50% of countries, 50.5% of countries with data on SDG 16. So not as overall SDG, just SDG 16, with various status inside each region. Some regions, Central Southern Asia, with a higher data availability, but we have certain groups, as you see in the bottom, with a lower data availability. Unfortunately, as also Rachel had already said, there's absolutely no target on track at this point. Next, please. So from all these targets that we have agreed, and I'm sorry if the letters are a little bit small, I hope everyone can read it. But from all the targets that we have here, none of them is on track. So not the part on death, not the part on the corruption, not on birth registration, give us the most basic right to be recognized as an individual. So we are not on track. Because of that, and because we have this huge urgency, UNDP, UNODC, OSHR, this is I'll speak very briefly on this, they developed a tool that will help us measure most of the survey-based indicators under SDG 16. So everything that you see with the darker blue are indicators that are covered by SDG 16. Everything that you see there with the lighter blue are indicators that are not covered by SDG 16, but there is a support system either by UNDP or UNODC or OSHR. For instance, intentional homicide, UNODC has a great mechanism to support. UNDP supports on measuring participation representation. OSHR on other indicators. So we have these several support mechanisms that are available, and we can share the links if you want to see. But we can approach any of the three of us, or the three agencies, or myself or Alex in this call if you want to hear more on the several mechanisms. Next. And for the survey-based indicator, the solution that I mentioned just now, it's going to measure discrimination, corruption, violence, human trafficking, access to justice, and governance. On discrimination, for instance, we measured just the indicator 16B1, which is an indicator where OSHR is the main custodian agency and gives the main support. So we are measuring only that indicator, and what my colleagues who will speak later are doing is conceptualizing the broader discrimination going beyond just the indicator group. So, but that part of the indicator that was approved, there's already a methodology. The corruption, as I said, you can measure bribery. That's the main focus. It is a crucial part of the agenda. On violence, there's the violence reporting, measure safety, physical, psychological, and physical and sexual violence. We measure also harassment. These indicators also helps you track the intimate partner violence, which most NSOs do track because of the gender-based violence agenda or because of other parts, and it's also a part that is measured elsewhere inside the framework. And it has women trafficking, access to justice. In the registration, there's a colleague that put a very pertinent question: what's happening with access to justice? So access to justice, there is this model that is measuring the civil part of access to justice, but on the violence part as well, there is a measurement of access to justice on the criminal side. So there is this two parts that can be measured with the survey. We also measure political efficacy, satisfaction of public service. So it's not just are we building school, are we building, what are we building, or we have enough teachers, but also the service that we are delivering, are they actually meeting the population expectation? Next. So those were the several tools, and thanks to those tools and several other tools, I cannot say that everything is done. There's several actors working. We now have some idea of where we are. So I'm very briefly, just to the end, I'll share the latest Global Progress Report that was developed by UNDP, UNODC, OSHR, where we try to aggregate a little bit how are we in SDG 16. And because I don't have many minutes and I don't want to make Alex anxious because I'm stealing the time from my precious colleagues that are speaking next. So I'll be very brief. But the situation that we are now, on inclusiveness, we're not at the best. We continue to have a huge underrepresentation of women in parliament. So we still continue, it's just 26.9. This has a reflection on having more responsive entities that are able to address and respond to several needs. We have the same situation in public service. There's a huge underrepresentation. Our discrimination is affecting 1 in every 6 individuals, being that the individuals with disability are being discriminated nearly twice as frequently, so they're in a much more acute situation regarding this. We have another very peculiar and a very essential constraint, which is the registration of children. So we have 1/5 of children still unregistered, which means that 1/5 of our children, they cannot be seen by our states because they don't have an identity to be recognized as an individual. Next. If we go, for instance, the representation of women specifically, this is under public service, we see we are at this point is 0.8. This is a parity. So that means that we are a little bit, it's a little bit lower. We don't have equal women and men. This is for the world, so we are at 0.8. Everything that we go under 1, that means we have underrepresentation. Everything above 1 means we have overrepresentation of women. So Northern America and Europe, we have overrepresentation of women in public service. But if we go to the Central Asia and Southern Asia, we have a huge underrepresentation of women. And the same Western Asia and Northern Africa. Next. And I see Mr. Midru saying that this is very interesting. Seeing the statistics of how we are at this point. So the other part is our safety. That is another part that the SDG 16 measures. How are we? On conflict-related deaths, we had a very acute increase. We have a 72% increase of conflict-related death. And I might say not only that has increased, but also how the warfare has increased, which I'll mention again in a minute. We have a woman are 4 in every 10 victims, and children are 3 in every 10. Men are more affected by homicide, but we have a very large part, with 20% still being women. Next slide. And as I was saying, the warfare is changing from 22 to 23. The death caused by heavy weapons and explosive munitions changed from 36% to 68%. This is a huge increase. Next. And we are nearly at the end of the presentation. And on organized crime and corruption, this is one this year being discussed, one of the flag issues to be addressed or to be assessed or where we are. We don't have, this is one of the indicators that we don't have sufficient data to do a global estimate, but we have for certain specific countries. And for the countries that we have information, we can see there's a huge drain of illicit financial flows that are moving from our government. Trafficking is affecting 2.5, 2 in 5 children, and corruption continues to be persistent. And now I'm going to my last slide. And in trafficking persons, we see that there is a very different on the profile of the victims that are being detected. Bear in mind that there's a lot of victims that we cannot detect. And I've just highlighted here, and when the presentation is shared, you'll be able to see exactly the percentages, and the Global Progress Report will give you more precise numbers. Next slide. And this is all from UNEP for today. And any point that you want to discuss, please write to myself or to Alex. We'll be very pleased to discuss with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariana. Clearly, this is a short cafe session, but we will be hopefully, holding another virtual meeting or a webinar globally where we can have a little bit more time to delve into some of the data, the progress data that Mariana has shared, because I'm sure there are a number of queries similar to what Mridul has put in the comments. And it was great, Mariana, also to show how the SDG 16 measurement forms part of a broader measurement in terms of the governance, the subdomains of governance statistics, which is what we're going to hear about now. As I hand over to Liliana to share the work of the prior city group, and also to Vebjorn to complement that, going into more of the details. And just to note that we have another important colleague from the prior city group, Marjut Piastainen from Statistics Finland, who is a co-chair of one of the task teams we're about to talk about, the task team on discrimination and equality. So we're running a little bit behind time. So without further ado, going to hand over to Liliana. Thanks, Liliana.
Good morning from Cabo Verde. My name is Liliana Monteiro, and I'm doing this presentation on behalf of Mr. Eduardo Garcia, that's the coordinator of the prior group secretariat. So we'll start with a little presentation about prior group. And before I start, I just want to say that unfortunately, I don't have access to the chat for technical reasons, so I cannot see questions if people put questions in the chat. So I ask Marjut if she can be attentive to that. And I cannot share to prior group contacts, but we are available to answer your questions and other things that maybe will not be possible during this presentation due to time constraints. So prior group on governance statistics is a city group that was created in 2015 by the UN Statistical Commission with the mandate to help establish international standards and methods for the compilation of statistics on the major dimensions of governance. In our first term, and that was from 2015 until 2020, we published the Handbook on Governance Statistics. In this handbook, we had the identification of 8 dimensions of governance. It was a result of the work of several organizations. And these dimensions are the ones that are stated here: non-discrimination and equality, participation in political and public affairs, openness, access to and quality of justice, responsiveness, absence of corruption, trust, safety and security. And these dimensions, as Mariana has already mentioned, were the dimensions that were approved by the UN Statistical Commission in the revised classification of statistical activity when governance was included as a new domain of official statistics in March 2023. So next slide, please. But in the second term of the prior group, because now we are in our second term, we were mandated to do further improve of methodology and standardization, and to have a focus on having low cost and sustainable methodologies. So that's why prior group has been working in creating short surveys models with more or less 10 core questions that can be attached to large surveys. During 2021 until this moment, we have been working with 2 priority dimensions. We didn't work with all the dimensions, but the members of the prior group identified 2 dimensions. They are participation in political and public affairs and discrimination and equality. And is in those 2 dimensions that we have been working real hard to create these methodologies. And why we chose these dimensions, it was dimension chosen by the members, and we believed those were dimensions chosen because regarding political participation, we can see in the world that we have now a decline in voter turnout, disengagement from political life, declining trust in government, uh, increase in disinformation, threats against civic freedoms and political rights. And all of that makes this dimension very important to measure, very important to see what's happening in our countries. And regarding discrimination and equality, we have the 2030 agenda, Leave No One Behind, and we can see that now the reality that we have in most of the countries when we have extreme polarization, hate speech, intolerance against minorities, and all these are key drivers of conflicts. So the reasons these two dimensions were very important, and that's why we are working with those dimensions. Um, Next slide, please. So how Prior Group is working is with two task teams. We have two very hard working task teams. The participation in political and public affairs is chaired by Statistics Norway, that we have Vibjorn that will continue this presentation, that will talk about the questionnaire on this dimension. And we have the non-discrimination and equality task team that is chaired by Statistics Finland, where Marjut is here present, and by INE Peru. The task teams have more than 100 members in each task team from all regions. The members are mainly NSOs, but we also have research institutions, international and regional organizations, academia, civil society. And since 2021, we have been developing conceptual frameworks, mapping existing questions, identifying priority data needs, and all this led to our questionnaires that we are building now. And during last year, we had cognitive testings of these questionnaires in 13 countries. And our task teams are supported by UNDP, by OHCHR, and by UN Human. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to speak a little bit about the questionnaire on non-discrimination and equality. And after that, my colleague Bjorn will talk about the other questionnaires. So this, as I mentioned, during 2023, we had cognitive tests of these questionnaires. This particular questionnaires was cognitive tested in Cabo Verde, Colombia, Ireland, Madagascar, Peru, and Vietnam. It was our only Asian country that participated, and we are doing this presentation to encourage other Asian countries to participate, because now we are in the process of doing cognitive tests, of doing pilot testing of our questionnaire. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about our questionnaire. The main focus on this questionnaire is on personal experience of discrimination and harassment. And after that, after this slide, I will show some examples of some questions of our questionnaires, and focus on this personal experience of discrimination and harassment. We'll have questions that include the life domains where this experience occurred, reporting behavior, if people report or not this experience that they had, and why, what are the reasons for not reporting, and the satisfaction level, if they reported, what were the satisfaction level of this report, and psychological and behavioral effects on victims. And we also focus on attitudes toward minorities. We focus on perceived prevalence of discrimination in the country, and also in awareness of national and legislative institutional framework to combat discrimination and promote equality. So this is a short questionnaire with 8 core questions, so it can be included in major surveys, but it has also 25 optional questions that the countries can choose which are the domains, which are the areas are more important to them, so they can choose these optional questions to have this overview about non-discrimination and equality in their country. So next slide, please. Now I will just show some examples of the questions of our questionnaires. Here you have a question about the experience of discrimination, that it's based on the 11 prohibited grounds under international law. That's why we chosen this and not others. And you can see that we always have a country-specific ground of discrimination, because if in your country you have other causes of discrimination that are not included in the 11 prohibited grounds, you can also ask that. Next slide, please. And here we have a question about what are the situations where people experience these incidents of discrimination or harassment. And here you can see too that we have a country-specific situation. Next slide. And here, for example, is the reasons why people don't report when they are discriminated or harassed. So these are some examples of questions that are in our questionnaires. And if you want to know more, if you want to know the questionnaire, please contact Prior Group. So we will be happy to send you the questionnaires and to answer all your questions. Next slide, please. And now I'll pass the floor to my colleague Vibjorn, that is going to continue this presentation, focusing on the questionnaires on participation in political and public affairs.
Thank you so much, Liliana. So my name is Vebjørn Ålandsli, and I come from Statistics Norway, and we have been sharing this task team on participation in political and public affairs. And when we said yes to this from Statistics Norway side, it was very much that we saw this need to kind of bridge the gap between those who survey and cover this subject matter and the national statistical offices. We wanted to give the NSOs a tool to measure participation in political and public affairs, and to do that in different forms, because traditionally this has not been done so much by the NSOs, but it's been done by other institutions. But on the recommendation then from the United Nations Statistical Commission and a decision there, we have tried to follow up on this and to produce a tool that NSOs can find useful in order to better measure this domain and this subject matter area. So the survey that I will talk about here is designed to provide policymakers with data that they can use to remove barriers to participation, and also to foster and engage more civic engagement in public life and at elections. Equivalent to the other task team, you can see that we have done cognitive testing of this tool by 7 different national statistical offices. And there's been a long process behind developing the questionnaire. In the next slide, I will go on and describe kind of how it is, the composition of the questionnaire. It consists of 3 parts. The first one on participation in electoral processes, more or less an election survey. Then we have a second part on participation in political and civic life, also beyond elections. And the third one we have chosen to call the enabling environment of participation. What constitutes kind of what surrounds the environment of participating in these processes. So the idea is that these questionnaires are to be administered post-election, preferably within 12 months after the most recent election. Could be national, state, or local election. And also something that is new, a new development with the questionnaire is that we try to take into account different diverse electoral registration systems. You have some registration systems that are very more active, where in order to vote, you have to register to vote. Whereas in other countries, this is done in a more passive way, where people automatically, if you are on a certain age, have the right to vote. But this questionnaire tries to take into account all these different types of electoral systems. The next slide, please. The first one of the questionnaires covers different barriers to registration, reasons for not voting. As Liliana said, we have seen a general global trend with less participation. Try to cover problems that voters can encounter when they go to vote, and also to see participation in election-related activities, and whether fear of intimidation, violence are kind of barriers to participate. The second part of the questionnaire, we try to cover participation in political and civic life, where we look upon membership in political parties, whether you find political parties in your country that use reasonably well, whether you're a member in political civic organization, and also other forms of different forms of political and social action. Take the next slide. And then as the third kind of dimension, we have what we have called the enabling environment of participation, where we have interest in political and public affairs. We try to measure main sources of information on these topics. Also have a question on politics and social media, different attitudes towards persons from minority groups, attitudes towards women as political leaders, and also whether people feel whether they have a say, has agency, has influence over what the government does. This is here we also have a link to one of the SDG indicators. In total, in the questionnaire, we have 14 core questions, and we have 10 optional questions. We are still in a process where we see kind of the ultimate goal would be to have so few core questions as possible, in order for countries to easily adapt and include these in surveys. I'm not sure whether you all are familiar with the Washington Group and their work on disability statistics. They have managed to find 6 core questions that cover this topic. We are trying to gauge the number of questions down to a level around that. Then I have the next slide. We have very quickly now I've included a few examples of the questions that we have in the survey. One question here about did you encounter any of the following problems when you try to access the polling place? And we list different challenges that potential voters can experience. And we also have a point here in the one in yellow, where we also can list more country-specific problems. So the idea here is we want an instrument that can be globally used globally, and also to compare globally. But in addition to that, we obviously see that there can be need for country-specific adjustments. So we can take the next slide. And another example. Did you encounter any of these problems when trying to cast your vote? And then we list a number of different challenges that voters can meet. And also here we have the country-specific problem, where NSOs themselves can list what they see. I take the next slide. And another example here, we have included these just to show you in practice what the questionnaire entails. We don't have the time to really go into the details here, but as you can see here are some forms of political and social action that people can take, and where we ask whether you have taken any of those during the last year, and in order to better measure this phenomenon. And again, we also have a point here about country-specific, where countries themselves can add alternatives that they see fit. Then we can move on to the next slide. So in order to follow up on kind of the whole process and to finalize a questionnaire that can be presented for the statistical mission, we have tried to have as an inclusive process as possible. So earlier in the year, an invitation was sent to all Director Generals of all national statistical offices, and where the NSOs were offered different options in order to test the questionnaires. Unfortunately, we have not had many kind of takes-ups or NSOs from the ESCAP region who have taken up on this. So we repeat the call to NSOs to either to go for the testing options of this questionnaire, and as a second best option, we hope that NSOs can look into these surveys and come with suggestions on improvements, give their feedback for how to improve the questionnaires. If you want to go with kind of the full testing route, then you have to give feedback by April 2025, as we will have a gathering in Oslo in May 2025, where we will finalize the questionnaires. We can take the next slide. So these are the countries that have so far have indicated that they want to go on with the field testing, piloting. You can see that there are more countries when it comes to the non-discrimination and equality questionnaire than there are for participation in political and public affairs. Many will do it in 2024. A few will carry out the testing in 2025. And again, repeat, if your country want to be a part of this process, this would be very much welcome. And do contact the prior group secretariat at the email that is listed below here, if you see that there is a possibility for that. Then I have the last slide just to show. We give an overview of the next steps for the task team. Ongoing now and up till 2025 will be field testing and piloting of the two questionnaires. Then we will have a round of analysis of the feedback that we get, and we will also have this in-person workshop, and we will revise the questionnaires and present kind of a version that is ready for global consultation. That will happen in the second part of 2025. And then we will send out the instruments or the questionnaires to all NSOs, and they are being given the possibility to give feedback. And then we hope that by March 2026, when it comes to the Statistical Commission that year, that we can endorse and finalize the instruments. So that was a very quick and brief overview of both the process and the contents of the two questionnaires. And then I hand over the microphone to you, Alexandra.
Great. Thank you very much, Liliana and Vebjørn. That was really comprehensive, both the content of the draft questionnaires and some of the process issues. And really great that you reinforced that there are several ways that the statistics officers and others can engage in this, either through pilot testing, through reviewing the questionnaire, through engaging with the work of the prior group more generally. So that's really helpful, and so great to see that we have these instruments near finalization, measuring what has traditionally been seen as really complex areas of measurement and really central to inclusive governance issues. So now we have, actually, before we open up for questions and comments, I just wanted to see whether our colleague from Statistics Finland wanted to come in and complement what Liliana has shared in terms of the work of the task team on anti-discrimination and equality. Sorry to put you on the spot, but if you have anything you wanted to reinforce or complement, please do.
Okay.
And please,
Yeah.
Good, great, lovely. Please, floor is
Yes.
yours.
Thank you. Very quickly. Thank you, Liliana and Webber. First, I want to point out that this process is really a country-led process, and I really, as chair, I've been really impressed to see how the NSOs have been so engaged, either in the survey design phase by sharing their own experiences with similar questionnaires, or in the cognitive testing phase. And NSOs have been volunteering to share their time or use their time and expertise and resources to achieve the shared goal of producing a short but highly quality survey model that would equip policymakers with a need to address these important issues, which are really critical for the peace and stability of any country. And I really would like to encourage countries to join this field testing, and it's important that we have all areas represented and the questionnaire is tested in different areas. Thank you.
Thanks also, and I saw from that last slide, Vebjorn, there's no countries engaged so far from the Asia-Pacific region, so that would be very important to have that experience included. So now we have a few minutes for questions and comments, also on Mariana's sharing of the support around SDG 16 measurement, monitoring and reporting. If there are statistics officers or others that have particular questions or challenges that they are facing, please do share what some of those may be, or some of the advances that you've made. It would be great to hear from you, and if colleagues are interested in a little bit more of the analysis around SDG 16 progress in the region, this is a moment now if you have any questions or comments. And also, I know it was very content-rich cafe, so I'm sure our colleagues might also want a deeper dive into some of the content of the draft questionnaire, the domains for discrimination, the areas, the participation measurement areas. So this is an opportunity now. But that being said, please do, we can share those draft questionnaires with you, and you can, have a little bit more time to look through them more carefully. So are there any, does anyone want to take the floor? Otherwise, I'm going to have a look at the comments. In the meantime, we have a comment from Mark Orkin. Good to hear from you, Mark. The NSOs of the Global North seem rather underrepresented in the testing of the questionnaires. Okay, that's a good question, observation. Vebjorn, Majut, Liliana, do you want to come in and talk a little bit more about the outreach and the efforts to to have engagement of a diverse range of NSOs on that. Is there anything you'd like to say to this observation from Mark? Please come in.
Yeah, I can start, and then the others can follow on. But first of all, when this is when it comes to the kind of the actual piloting and cognitive testing of the questionnaire, we obviously it's a correct observation that we have fewer countries from the global north. However, in the actual task teams, many of the countries from these areas have been represented. So it's not that their views have not been taken into account at all. But when it comes to the actual testing, that is certainly the case. I'm not sure whether the other colleagues also have comments on this.
Okay, good. That's helpful, Vebjørn. And then I think there was a comment earlier during Mariana's presentation around the sort of the progress status of different subregions. And I think Mariana has tried to address some of that in terms of where they are, but not necessarily unpacking the drivers. So I'm not sure if colleagues from ESCAP might also want to weigh in on the sort of performance, if we could call it that, of different subregions. This is an opportunity also to share an assessment on that.
From the ESCAP side, we do our annual assessment of SDG progress, and we also have our SDG gateway. I'll try and put a link in the chat bar where you can see what we have done. But just to say, it is very limited, because if the data's not there, then we can't do the assessment. And for that, for the SDG gateway, we really are relying on countries and what they're reporting through the kind of custodian agencies. So yeah, we can only really do the assessment based on the information that's there. And as we've already said, there isn't enough information for us to make a good assessment on that one. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Rachel. If you could put that link in the chat, that would be great. And over to you, Mariana.
Not necessarily on the difference, but also if ESCAP is, and they're the ones who own most of the information, if they don't have the full information yet. But this might have helped the change on the statistics. ESCAP plus several colleagues, so it was ESCAP, UNOCHR, UNESCO, UNICEF, and several other actors. They did 2 regional trainings on SDG 16. Targeting the methodology of the indicators, and ESCAP led a lot of this initiative. Through that, we went through the methodology for each indicator. And for some countries, we found out some countries, they already had the data, they just did not know it was the SDG indicator. Or sometimes they did not know who to send it to, so the mechanism was unclear. So the regional training did not gave them the idea of how to compute and how to report. So they reported more. That does not mean necessarily that they produced more. So I believe it's mostly indicated that they already had they transmit. So that made a big jump from 40 to 50 for those 2 for Asia and for Pacific. I believe this is the drivers. I cannot say in 100% accuracy that this is the reason of the increase on data availability for the region. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
That's helpful, Mariana. And just, I'm not sure if Majid is tech difficulties, but she said in the chat that many questions of the module, of course, have been used and tested in other surveys in Europe. So that's good to have that. Good. There we've got the link to, from ESCAP. Here's a comment or a question from Diane. If a country would like to implement one of these surveys and or participate in their design, what should be steps to follow? Now I understand from Liliana and from Vebjorn to reach out through the email to the prior group to get engaged, and they will share the questionnaires, and we can put the email in the chat, but it's also embedded in the presentation. We will include other contact details as well for the work on SDG 16. Okay, I think that was the last comment. So I think we'll wrap things up. It's on the hour. Just to thank everyone for listening to us, for engaging with us. You know where to find us, where we would welcome you getting in touch. We would welcome opportunities to support. We really appreciate this collaboration with Rachel and team. We really do need to close these SDG 16 data gaps, and we will work in a concerted way as much as we can in the centre to do that. We'd be happy to, to regularly keep you updated also as these questionnaires are pilot tested and finalised. But keep engaged with us. We'd really appreciate that. So with that, handing back over to Rachel, I believe, and thank you all for your time.
So let me just also say huge thanks to the presenters, but also to the participants as well. So great to have so many of you engaged today. Let me also repeat that request. We do need more, we need some Asia-Pacific countries to be engaged in actually testing the questionnaire, because we recognise that, every region is quite different, and we know that at the country level, contexts are very different. So we really do want that opportunity to test and to make sure that this does really respond to different contexts. So please do get in touch with the prior group. They've included the email there. So please make use of that. And even if you're just possibly thinking about getting involved, just reach out to them and find out what's involved so that they can discuss it further with you. Let me also say, just to also let you know that we have sent out invitations this week to our ESCAP Committee on Statistics, which takes place for the Asia-Pacific region, and that's taking place the 11th to the 13th of December this year. And our invitations have just gone out to all countries in the region and to international and regional organisations this week. So many of you will have seen them, or somebody in your organisation will have seen those. And we've got a link there as well in this sidebar to the QR code, so you can see more information with the provisional agenda, and we will be giving more details in the coming weeks. So thank you, everyone. Thanks very much, Alexandra, as well, for moderating this session, and look forward to seeing many of you again in the coming weeks. Thank you.